When you live in a small town, there's a certain comfort in routine. You know the comings and goings of the place as if it's a living, breathing entity. I lived in such a town, Coburn, population 326. And like clockwork, every day at 7 p.m., the static crackle of the public announcement system would echo throughout the sleepy streets. Attention, curfew begins in 5 minutes. Please head to your home now. No one questioned it. It was a quirk of our town. Just as no one questioned why old Mrs. Henderson painted her picket fence every other Tuesday, or why Mr. Calloway, the barber, had kept the same broken clock on his wall for 30 years. It was just the way it was. It was late one summer evening, and I was just closing up the local diner where I worked, serving up hot coffee and pie to our town's inhabitants. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, and I was lost in the beauty of it when the familiar announcement startled me. Attention, curfew begins in 5 minutes. Please head to your home now. Glancing at my wristwatch, I felt a surge of panic. 6:55 p.m. I quickly locked up the diner and started to make my way home, my heart pounding with each step. It wasn't far, but the curfew was something we all took seriously. As I reached the halfway point, a sudden breeze sent a chill down my spine. The beautiful summer evening had taken on a sinister edge. The once colorful horizon was now a dark purple, and an uncomfortable silence had fallen over the town. The lights in every house were out, curtains drawn. Even Mr. Calloway's barbershop was swallowed in darkness, the usually inviting warm glow extinguished. It felt as though the town was holding its breath, waiting. I quickened my pace, the sound of my footsteps uncomfortably loud in the silence. I passed by Mrs. Henderson's house, her freshly painted fence gleaming white in the fading light, and then the town hall, its tall clock tower ominously overlooking the empty streets. Just as I turned the corner onto my street, a sudden shuffling sound stopped me in my tracks. It was quiet, almost drowned out by the pounding of my heart, but unmistakable. The rustling seemed to be coming from the alleyway a few houses down. Fear gripped me as I froze, straining my ears to decipher the source of the sound. I was contemplating whether to run or hide when a dark figure emerged from the alleyway, startling me. As it stepped into the dim light of the street lamp, my blood ran cold. It was Billy, the town's local drifter. His clothes were disheveled, and his usually warm eyes were wide with terror. He was clutching a dirty, ripped sack tightly, his knuckles white. "Billy," I whispered, stepping closer. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he just stared at me, his chest heaving. Then, with trembling hands, he offered me the sack. I hesitated before taking it, the weight of it surprising me. Inside were dozens of hastily scribbled notes, their edges crumpled and stained. The frantic handwriting was Billy's. I was sure of it. "Billy, what is all this?" I asked, panic rising in my voice. But he had already turned and disappeared back into the shadows of the alleyway. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I stumbled home, the sack clutched tightly in my hand. My house was dark and silent, just like the others. I closed the door behind me, my heart pounding as I began to sift through Billy's notes. Each one was more chilling than the last. They were filled with desperate warnings, frantic scribbles about the curfew, about what happens in the town after dark. Each note was a plea for help, a plea for someone to listen, to understand. I felt sick as the reality of Billy's notes sank in. All those years, the daily curfew, the town's silence, we had grown used to it, accepted it without question. But now, I sat there in the dark, the horror of Billy's notes sinking in, when a sudden knock echoed through the house. I froze, the sound jolting me from my thoughts. Who would be out after curfew? With each second that passed, the knocks grew louder, more desperate. I forced myself to move, making my way to the front door with bated breath. As I peered through the peephole, my blood ran cold. There, standing on my porch, was every single resident of Coburn. Their faces were blank, their eyes empty, and as I watched in growing horror, they began to speak in unison. "Curfew begins now. It is time. In that moment, I understood the true horror of our town's curfew, the sinister secret that we had all blindly accepted. Billy had tried to warn us, tried to open our eyes, but it was too late. As I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest, one thought echoed in my mind. What happens in Coburn after dark? But then again, maybe some things are better left unknown. The pounding at the door became frantic, their voices raised in an eerie chant that echoed through the silent house. I fell to the floor, the sack of Billy's warnings scattered around me. The nightmare of our town was real, and it was only just beginning. The last thing I remember before darkness enveloped me was the haunting echo of the public announcement system. Attention. Curfew begins in 5 minutes. Please head to your home now. It was no longer a warning, but a threat.